Sieg heil! Sieg heil! Die Bewegung, sie lebt und sie steht felsenfest begründet. Und solange auch nur einer von uns atmen kann, wird er diese Bewegung seine Kräfte leihen und für sie eintreten, damit die Verfehlung dieses Volkes und damit den Verrat der Rache.
Ein gesuchter Gesprächspartner ist der 104-jährige Zeuge Jehovas und KZ-Überlebende Leopold Engleitner. Die Bibel weiß den besten Rat, legt er seinen jungen Glaubensschwestern und Brüdern ans Herz.
Das Wichtigste ist die eigene Überzeugung. Das ist das Wichtigste. Aber wenn das nicht der Fall ist, bist du ein Opfer von der Masse. Ja, und das habe ich nie haben.
How were you liberated from the camp, or how did you manage to get out of it?
I was called to the guard room where they explained that I could be released if I agreed to spend the rest of my life working in agriculture. And I was willing to do that. The camp doctor said to me, "You're still one of those Jehovah's Witnesses, aren't you?" I said, "Jawohl." Then he said, "We can't really release you then, can we?" Then he looked me over and remarked, "We'll be glad to be rid of such a wretched creature as you." To be honest, he was right. I was covered in lice and weighed only 62 pounds. I had to get dressed because they gave me my civilian clothes. 2 SS-men were there, and they were determined to chase me through the cordon of sentries so they could shoot me. They would have thrown my cap beyond the line and shot me as if I had been escaping. But the capo prevented it. He said, he was a hard-working prisoner. He always worked diligently. He's going home now. That's been decided. He's going home. So the 2 SS-men were stopped from satisfying their thirst for blood.
Aufmachen! Öffnet die Türen!
Wer ist denn da?
Gestapo! Wird die jetzt erschießen? Bist du gefasst?
Hitler demanded total allegiance.
Warum nicht Deutschland?
In his crosshairs would be a small, relatively unknown group called Jehovah's Witnesses.
I've learned some important lessons in my time, but the most important one is to stand up for what is right. Sometimes that takes courage. I was in the lion's den. I needed a way out. A ladder, but not any ladder.
Many people define a hero as an ordinary person who summons up extraordinary courage, and that certainly describes Leopold Engleitner.
At 101 years of age, he is the oldest known survivor of the Nazi concentration camps, and he is here in the U.S. sharing his life story. KCAL9's Dave Bryant got to meet with him earlier this week. He joins us now live with more. Dave?
Carrie, Sylvia, in my book, when you live to be 100, that's no small achievement in and of itself. But when you undergo a rigorous speaking tour across the entire United States when you're 101, now that's quite an achievement. But with Leopold Engleitner, it was his life, what he has done with his 100 years, living by his principles, that's the real heart of this story. At 101, it's no small achievement that Leopold Engleitner, a retired Austrian farmer, is on a 3-week tour of the United States promoting his message to America. But after all he's been through, this is no big deal. Engleitner is the oldest known survivor of the Holocaust, having survived 3 Nazi concentration camps, including the notorious Buchenwald, an experience still burned into his memory more than 60 years later.
Bei der Einlieferung in Buchenwald.
The most horrible experience when he was delivered to Buchenwald concentration camp. The one who took care of him at the entrance, first of all, he did beat him, and then he pulled out a pistol and wanted to shoot him. On the last stop of his American tour, Engleitner came to the Museum of the Holocaust on Wilshire Boulevard in L.A. Not bitter, not angry, Mr. Engleitner, the subject of a book and documentary, Unbroken Will, is full of surprises. First of all, he's not Jewish. He's a Jehovah's Witness. And he was a conscientious objector at that time, imprisoned because he refused to fight for the Nazis and refused to say Heil Hitler. And that's part of his message, that Jews were not the only victims of the Holocaust. It needs to be known that other people than Jewish people perished. As a matter of fact, when you talk about the Holocaust, you talk about 6 million Jews, but there were other 8 million people who perished.
Jehovah's Witnesses were persecuted, as were homosexuals, as were Bastard am Rhein, as were gypsies, as were people with addiction problems. And all of these things need to be brought to light. But perhaps most surprising about Leopold Engleitner is that while his Jewish prison mates could not escape the terror of the concentration camps, he could have walked out a free man if he had signed a document renouncing his religion. He refused. It doesn't matter that he's of a different religion than we are. The message is still the same. The message is you must not forget. Engleitner urges his audiences to stand up for their principles, even if that means saying no at the risk of great personal harm. Still in good humor after all these years, he wants to meet his Austrian countryman, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and in halting English promises, if not on this trip, then maybe next time.
I'll be back.
I'm still laughing over that one. He's a remarkable man, 101 years old. His stay here in Los Angeles was extended by one day. He appeared last night at the Holocaust Museum, but there were so many people that wanted to get in, they extended it to an extra night. So this was actually his last night of appearing here in Los Angeles. Now he will head back to Austria, perhaps rest for his next trip to America. Don't be surprised if he's back next year.
The oldest male survivor of the Nazi concentration camps is in Southern California today. 103-year-old Leopold Engleitner was at the Reagan Library this morning, meeting the public and signing a book written about his life. Unbroken Will chronicles his ordeal at the hands of Hitler's Third Reich. Engleitner was arrested in 1939 and held in 3 concentration camps until the end of World War II. And through it all, he refused to renounce his faith. He says his story proves it was possible for an ordinary man to reject Hitler's regime of terror.
He is the oldest survivor of the Holocaust.
And tonight he's right here in the Southland. KCAL9 political reporter Dave Bryant joins us live from the Mid-Wilshire area with his survivor's story. Dave?
Well, Sandy, Sylvia, Leopold Engleitner is visiting Los Angeles from his home in Austria on his Unbroken Will USA tour. That sounds pretty normal, you know, the kind of thing that happens all the time. But this is a man who has cheated death his entire life, and he has lived more than a century. He was actually around when the Spanish flu pandemic hit the world in 1918, caught the flu and survived. And then things got even worse. When Leopold Engleitner was growing up in Austria, the most recent war he and his classmates studied was the American Civil War. And as a young man, he met former Austrian ruler Franz Joseph, whose reign began in 1849. Now Engleitner is 103 years old. He'll be 104 in July.
I am a happy boy, and I enjoy everything, and I have no time to die.
Just to prove the point, Engleitner and his associates have traveled 64,000 miles in the last 10 years, speaking to audiences like this one in the Mid-Wilshire district, raising awareness about the Holocaust. You see, Engleitner is the world's oldest known male Holocaust survivor. He spent 4 years in 3 concentration camps where he was starved down to 54 pounds at one point, beaten and kicked by his captors.
On the way back into the concentration camp, one SS man kicked him so hard that he destroyed some of his testicles. From then on, I was not able to have children.
His first camp was the infamous Buchenwald, where starving inmates were forced to work in a quarry.
They were breaking rocks there 12-hour days with their bare hands, with little food, little water. And many of these people were, if you talk to Leopold, you'll find that on an average day, 10, 12, 20 people were dying and they'd have to drag them up to the quarries.
Now, here's the other surprising thing about Leopold Engleitner. He's not Jewish. He's a devout member of the Jehovah's Witnesses who, unlike the Jewish prisoners, could have walked out of the concentration camp at any time if he had signed a paper renouncing his religion and endorsing the Nazis.
One SS man said to me, you have 2 possibilities. Either you sign the paper and you get out, or you die here. And then he said, I will not die here, nor will I sign the paper.
What's unique about his story is that this man actually had a choice. Jehovah's Witnesses were different than the Jewish experience in that these people went to the camps and they were given the opportunity to walk out of the camp at any time. All they had to do was sign a little document renouncing their faith and swearing their allegiance to Hitler and the Reich, and they wouldn't do it.
Instead of signing the Nazi loyalty papers, Engleitner, in a symbol of defiance, bought a battered black suitcase like this one in the concentration camp, knowing that someday he would be freed. 3 years ago, on his last visit to L.A., Leopold Engleitner vowed he'd return someday. Now he's made good on that promise and vows this won't be his farewell tour in California.
I'll be back.
And now you're seeing on the screen a list of places where Leopold Engleitner will be appearing on his Unbroken Will USA tour, including the Laemmle's Theater in West Hollywood, also appearance at UCLA, Moorpark College, and then he'll be back here at the LA Holocaust Museum. This is a man who has the heart of a lion and the courage of a warrior, although he put in his time in concentration camps because he was a conscientious objector and a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses. We're live in Mid-Wilshire. Dave Bryan, KCAL 9 News.
Leopold Engleitner was born on July 23, 1905 in Eigenvogelhub, Austria. Starting with his resignation from the Catholic Church, religious intolerance raised its ugly head again, and as all basic human rights were disregarded, he was severely persecuted from all sides.
One day, an official from the labor office in Bad Ischl paid me a visit and told me that I was not allowed to receive further unemployment benefits. His argument was that no religious sect was tolerated in Austria.
It was on October 5, 1939, that the senior guard of the police detention house in Linz came and told him the worst and most shocking news he would ever hear in his whole life.
Herr Engleitner, I'm very sorry, but in half an hour you will be transferred to Buchenwald concentration camp by train. You will still get something to eat, because who knows when you will ever have a full stomach again.
On Wednesday, October 9, 1939, Leopold Engleitner arrived at Weimar train station in Thuringia, Germany. It was late in the evening when he and the other detainees were ruthlessly squeezed into a prison lorry. They were then driven along what was called the Blood Road, which brought them to the Buchenwald camp.
They threatened to lock me up with the bears. At first I thought this was funny, convinced that they were only joking. Later, when I saw the bears in the pit, I realized the danger I was in. As a newcomer, I was allotted to the penal company and received an outfit marked by a purple triangle, which showed that I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and a black dot, which indicated that I was assigned to work in the quarry.
At Wewelsburg train station, where he had to pack tools, Leopold Engleitner again experienced the brutality of the SS on his own body. One day, on the way home, he had to join another working unit, and because he couldn't keep pace, a small gap had developed between him and the one walking in front. A guard noticed this, grew very angry, and brutally kicked him from behind with his boot, between the legs, into his abdomen. Leopold Engleitner doubled up in pain, then collapsed on the spot, unable to move.
I couldn't walk anymore. The others had to carry me into the camp. At the evening roll call, I had to lie on the ground next to my fellow prisoners. Later I found out that the guard had crushed one of my testicles.
In April 1943, Himmler stopped the construction work, and Niederhagen concentration camp was closed. For this reason, Leopold Engleitner was deported to Ravensbrück concentration camp in the spring of 1943.
Then I was introduced to the camp medical officer. He asked me, "You are still a Jehovah's Witness?" I said, "Jawohl, Herr Hauptsturmführer." "We are not allowed to release you then, are we?" he remarked. After staring at me for some time, he finally said, "But I tell you what, we are glad to get rid of such a wretched creature as you." In that he was right, since I was covered in ulcers and weighed only 28 kilos.
After over 4 years of the most inhuman and brutal treatment, Leopold Engleitner returned home on July the 16th, 1943. Then, on April the 17th, 1945, Leopold Engleitner received his call-up papers. Within 6 hours, he had to report to the headquarters in Krumau, Czechoslovakia.
Since I was determined not to join this crazy war, I had no choice but to escape into the nearby mountain region.
He fled over the Vierlinger Wand into the forests on the southern slope of Leonsberg mountain. He was now a deserter, a conscientious objector, and everyone had the right to shoot him.
Men hunting men, making their victims hate just like them. Only the few who dare refuse their broad way do not lose themselves along the way. A tolerant soul at great cost has peace as his goal. Some would say the weak follow his lone course, but time tells of no stronger force. Unbroken will, unlike the weak who kneel, no compromising will ever do. Unbroken will, standing firm even still, determined the right thing ever to do. Unbroken will. No blood on his hands, he simply says no when evil demands. Should his story repeat itself in our day, will we choose his better way? Unbroken will, unlike the weak who kneel, no compromising will ever do. Unbroken will, standing firm even still, determine the right thing ever to do. Unbroken will. Evil may reign and ruin the innocent, but the spirit behind his will they can't kill. Unbroken will, unlike the weak who kneel, no compromising will ever do. Unbroken will, standing firm even still, determine the right thing ever to do. Unbroken will, unlike the weak who kneel, no compromising will ever do. Unbroken will, standing firm even still, determine the right thing ever to do. Unbroken